It will be an uneasy feeling in Laval, Quebec this morning as parents head back to work and send their kids to school or to daycare centres. Grief, fear, questions, all still lingering a day after a city bus in Laval crashed into a daycare, killing 2 children and sending 6 others to hospital. Quebec Premier François Legault will visit that site this morning in just about 2 hours' time to join the community in mourning. There was a vigil last night at a local church, Sainte-Rose-de-Lima, which is just a short drive from the daycare. People came last night to light candles and leave stuffed animals, mourning the children and supporting the families. These pictures from the other scene late last night at the end of that terrifying day. The bus pulled out of the daycare building and towed away from the scene. The driver is in police custody now. He faces multiple charges, including 2 counts of first-degree murder. We're going to have all the information we have on him in just a few minutes. But we want to begin live at the scene in Laval this hour. Rafi Boudjikanian is covering things for us. And Rafi, we are now more than 24 hours since that crash. And right now, 24 hours ago, it was bedlam, it was chaos, and it was a very tragic story which unfolded. What is happening there today?
Heather, we may be a day past the incident, but things are hardly back to normal. This is still a crime scene. Police have blocked off access to the daycare, although there is a little bit of movement now. We just saw them escort a group of adults into the area where the daycare is and then let them back out. They didn't speak to reporters. We're not exactly sure who they were, presumably parents of children at that daycare center, but there is, no access to the center itself yet. You can probably hear the news helicopter flying overhead. This is a community that's very much still reeling from what has happened. In a couple of hours, Quebec Premier François Legault is supposed to show up. We're not exactly sure where he'll come in Laval yet, perhaps at the daycare itself. That would make sense considering where the event happened, where this awful collision happened. But, police have still blocked it off, so a few questions there yet, too.
There are questions, but as I mentioned in introducing you, Rafi, there is such a range of emotion, shock, some anger, a lot of sadness, obviously. What are people in the community telling you now 24 hours later?
Earlier this morning, we ran into a school bus driver who told us he takes the exact same route as the city bus driver every day. Can't ever imagine doing anything like this suspect is alleged to have done, plow a bus through a daycare center, deliberately killing 2 children. We saw a group of runners as well saying they just had to try to get back into their morning routine, which includes a jog through this neighborhood. But this community will have questions for a long time yet. Have a listen to a couple of people who live here.
It's awful, it was like he was like the devil. I don't know how to explain it, but he was, for sure that man wasn't in his great mind to do that,
We cannot think this can happen here in Laval, We don't even think it could happen in Quebec, maybe somewhere else in Canada, not even.
Heather, just a few minutes ago, I was speaking to a volunteer at a nearby seniors residence who said that they did their best to keep this news from the residents in that home because they did not want to have them undergo the same shock as everyone else in the community is going through right now. And one wonders how long they can keep this awful event a secret. Surely there will be more and more coverage as we learn more about the suspect and then the court proceedings get closer. But for now, at least, they have managed to turn the TVs off there and make sure there are distractions to keep those residents away from this awful news.
Well, it is overwhelming news at a time when so much sadness is playing out in the world, Rafi. Thank you for that. And it's interesting. That's one of the things we can talk about with a professor of psychology who's going to join me in just a couple of minutes. Do you talk to children about this directly, or do you try to keep news like this from them? We'll discuss that in just a moment. Rafi Boudjikanian going to be leading our live coverage from the site in Laval, Quebec. Let's turn to the investigation, which is still ongoing. The suspect in custody, appearing by video link yesterday for a first court appearance and facing now 9 charges, including 2 counts of first-degree murder. His next court appearance later this month on the 17th. Hilary Johnstone has all of the details for us on that part of the story. Hilary, the suspect, the investigation, where are we with that today?
Well, Heather, we know that a psychiatric evaluation has now been ordered, so that will take place, as you say, next to court appearance not expected until the 17th of this month. But 51-year-old Pierre Ni Saint-Amand is facing a number of charges here, including 2 counts of first-degree murder, 1 count of attempted murder, 2 counts of aggravated assault, and 4 counts of assault causing bodily harm. That being the 51-year-old right there on your screen who you're looking at. We know that he has worked for the Transit Authority in Laval for 10 years. We understand that no prior incidents on his record. But when we take a look at some of those other details as well, of course, we know that yesterday he did make a court appearance, but that was via video link from his hospital bed. We know that one of the police officers who was at his bedside reported during that court appearance that he had been struck by this 51-year-old man. We know that the court proceeding did stop at one point, and like we say, that evaluation has now been ordered. When we take a look at the route that it is believed that he took, we know that he was driving that bus 151. We do understand that there is a bus stop in the area, but that there is not a bus stop directly in front of that daycare. So believe that he took this route. You can see that it's at the end. That daycare is at the end of that private driveway, not near that bus stop. Now, in terms of the investigation here, of course, there is a lot to go through. And that's something that we're hearing from the former deputy director of the Sûreté du Québec, the Quebec Provincial Police, that investigators really have their work cut out here in terms of what they're going to have to do and what they're going to have to prove as well. Here's a little bit of what we've been hearing.
The investigators are going to be focusing on the fact that how do we prove that this is not an accident? They're going to make an investigation on the bus itself. Was it working properly? Was it in good condition? Second is the guy really was driving? And third, what was his motivation?
So a lot to be doing, of course, Heather. And something else we've been talking about all morning is that the province has come out and announced, officials have announced that there will be help available for people who are distressed by everything that happened yesterday. Going to be really important, of course, going forward.
Well, indeed, Hilary, thank you very much. Hilary Johnstone there in Ottawa. And that leads us right into our guest this hour. Deborah Hummel is a psychologist and a professor of psychoeducation at the University of Sherbrooke, the Longueuil campus, and she's in Longueuil, Quebec this morning. Professor, welcome. I'm happy to welcome you on the program today.
Thank you.
Hilary was just mentioning the support that's now available. We did hear from Laval Police that they are putting up a control center to offer psychosocial support, counseling, anybody in the community who needs to talk to somebody. For the people of the community, what do you think of the value of that at this point?
It's really important. You know, what's usually most difficult when something like that happens is like it doesn't make sense. You can't explain. It doesn't make sense to live something like that. So what helps in those conditions is to be able to tell your story, to have people you can explain or try to make sense of what's happening. So the support is really important.
So that's for the community. I'd like to ask a couple of things specifically about children, for parents wondering what to say. Let me ask, first of all, do they even have this discussion with children, or do they try to shield them from this horrible news?
I don't think it's possible to hide that. You know, we are discussing that. There are pictures. You may listen to that from your friends at school. So it's always better to learn difficult news from someone of trust, someone you know, someone who cares for you. So I would suggest to discuss that with children, but the manner you do that is important. So you have to start from when the kid is. What does he or she understand? Does he or she has question? And then to try to choose words that are appropriate to he or her level of development.
Oh, so the age of the child, how you deal with the child, very important that it's age appropriate.
Yeah, that you use word that is simple and that they understand. And you be sure, did you understand what I said? Do you have another question? What do you think about that? To really have, because we have our own feelings and understanding as adults, but children are not necessarily at the same page.
Is it important to reassure the children regardless of age? I mean, should that be sort of at the core of any discussion?
Yes, but you have to be prudent, cautious to what you say, because there are promises we can't make. I can't say that I'll always be there for you. That's not possible, because one day I may not be there anymore. But what we can say is that adults are doing their best to protect, like the driver.
Just bear with me for one moment. We'll see if we can get our guest back.
That situation, that it's not happening again. So yes, reassuring, but being again cautious with the words you use to reassure it.
And we just lost a little bit of our conversation. Your signal just froze, but I think we got the most important parts there, Professor. You're right. I mean, you're speaking to them about fear, but you're also speaking to children about death and death of other little children. So yes. Is it the whole notion of death, you know, in terms of introducing that whole concept with them? Is that part of the discussion too?
Yes, it's important. And it's, again, important to choose the word right. They are dead. They are not lost. Like a toy could be lost. You can lose a toy, but then you can find it again. But the friend, unfortunately, is dead. Their friend won't come back again. Mm-hmm. And it's difficult because depending on their age, children doesn't really understand that death is irreversible, that you cannot come back when you're dead. So that's, again, a way to be cautious and to try to be appropriate with the age of the child, and to explain with word that he can understand, but to use the real word. He's not lost. He's not somewhere in the sky. Unfortunately, the friend is dead.
Yes. I'm just wondering, you know, if a family has that kind of discussion and feels good about the discussion with the child, and hopefully the child is, you know, is accepting that and is doing okay. But I'm just wondering, what should a parent watch for, maybe in these coming days, either listen for or watch for, perhaps their child is not fine with what has happened? What are the signs?
Yes, that's extremely important, your question, so thank you. It's everything that is not normal. Nightmares, being irritable, not wanting to go to school or to daycare, doing things or behaviors that the child normally doesn't do. That's the sign to be looking for. And the parent and the teacher or the educator that are close to the child are the most appropriate person to watch and to be witness of those changes. And if there are important changes, that's maybe a sign that something must be done to help the child.
And is that then a time for another conversation, or what then if you're starting to notice signs?
The conversation could be ongoing, and then if it's really severe, like in a more severe form, then it's to consult, maybe discuss with the school, with daycare, on maybe look for the doctor or other professional.
Okay, this is so helpful. I feel like I have to ask a question though, on behalf of the parents, because the children in some ways may adapt more readily. For the parents, you know, dropping their child off, the most normal of activities, drop off at a daycare center, is no place safe. We're hearing that from the parents in Laval over and over again. So the parents may well be traumatized. What's your advice for them at this point?
I have my answer will cover 2 points. First, yes, and it has to be recognized that we can experience feeling like I, as a mother with a child in daycare, was devastated yesterday when I learned the story. So I have to pay attention to my own feelings, and it's important that my own feelings and my needs don't go on my child. So it's important to make the difference, and then to go back to normal life. Then it's recognizing that there was a shock, and to have place to live and experience those feelings.
Professor Deborah Hummel, thank you so much. An important conversation, and I very much appreciate your sharing your expertise with us. Thank you.
A pleasure.